Welcome to Man It's Keep. I'm Daniel. In this video, I want to talk a bit about procedural combat. I've talked about this before, and actually I recently got a comment where somebody asked me, could you get deeper into it and also maybe mention how you did it in other systems, specifically 5th edition? So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. But first, I want to kind of give an overview of what procedural combat is, what I mean by it, and why I like it, and what generally goes with it, which is side initiative. Okay, so all combat, I would imagine, in most games has a procedure to it. But when I say procedural combat, I'm talking about phased combat. That is to say that things go in a certain order. Everybody moves, everybody does missile fire, everybody casts spells, all the melees happen, then there's morale. So there's a few reasons why I really like this. The first reason is that it's just easier to keep track of at the table, both for you and your players. Basically, because it's simpler and people understand the process, you're never like waiting, like, when am I going to go? How long is this going to take? You kind of know, okay, I'm moving, I'm doing this. And generally with procedural combat, you are calling out your suggested, we'll call it, action at the beginning of the round. So if you imagine running a combat, first I'm going to say, okay, here's a situation. There's an ogre in front of you with a giant club standing on the bridge. He's stepping towards you aggressively. So we know a combat's about to happen, right? There's a bridge, there's an ogre. And then I will look at my first player and I will say, what do you want to do? And sometimes they'll get really elaborately into it, but basically what I want to know from them is generally what they're going to do. I'm going to cast a spell. I'm going to shoot my bow. I'm going to run. I'm going to engage the ogre in melee. That's all I really want to know. I don't care about what weapon you're using or exactly that at this moment. I will ask each player as it goes around the table what they're going to do. This is framing the scene. Now, during this period, it's not like they can't interact. So if I look at the first person and say, what are you going to do? And they go, I'm going to cast a spell, a fireball spell, let's say. Then another player might be like, well, hold on. I'm good at wrestling. I'm going to charge the ogre and knock it off the bridge. So don't cast a spell. You'll hit me too. Then they can go, okay, I'm not going to cast my spell. I'm going to stand back and just make sure that if things go south, I can cast Hold Monster on the ogre, right? Because that's not going to be a problem. Or maybe they can cast it first. Next, I'm going to use my bow and shoot the ogre in the kneecap to help so that when they go to knock him off the bridge, they'll be off balance. Okay, cool. And so on. And by doing this, we're creating basically a little scene, okay? Now, once all that's said, and of course, I'll say, well, the ogre's coming forward with their club to smack you in the head. Now we roll initiative. And this is the beauty of it. Because you've set this scene, you have this anticipation that this is our plan, right? That initiative roll becomes very like, okay, are we going to get there first to do it? Are we going to be able to run from the ogre? Are we going to be able to shoot him in the kneecap? Are we going to be able to cast a spell? Can we do it? And assuming that you win initiative, you'll get a chance, right? But now the ogre wins initiative and it moves forward. Now, all of a sudden, the plans are out the window. So what do we do there? I'm going to talk about that in a second, but you get the idea. This is why this can be really fun. It builds this teamwork, but it's also kind of like, oh man, what happens now if we don't get this roll? Rolling that initiative becomes really, really fun and exciting. So speaking of initiative, one of the reasons why I switched to this kind of combat for my 5th edition game, and really all the games I run that I can, is because I like rolling initiative every round. I love that little random part, if you couldn't tell by that little story I told. So that makes it combat exciting for me. Every 2 to 3 minutes as a round finishes, there's a new initiative, right? It doesn't just keep going around robin. Something fresh is happening. And because of this, it adds a lot of drama to the table. What's happening? Are we going to win? Are we not going to win? How can we plan this out? And you have these little like minor like team building exercises, quickly saying what everybody's going to do, and then you roll and do we do it or not? Because it's really the results of combat that are interesting, not so much the actual combat, at least to me. If you're having trouble wrapping your head around this, just think for a second about how you DM. If you're running a game like 5th edition and you have 4 PCs and they face off against 6 orcs, do you roll initiative for all 6 orcs? Probably not. The game suggests you don't, right? That type of monster all goes in the same turn. Well, same thing. That type of monster that is the player characters all go together. So as I mentioned, I like a phased combat where things happen in certain order. Once you've got it down, it can be really nice because you can say, everyone who's shooting a missile weapon, roll. Everyone who's attacking with melee, roll. What did you get? What did you get? What did you get? And combat starts to be real fast and furious, right? You get this real tension going and things are moving. But when you're first starting, it still makes sense for you to stay organized. But it's important that you explain to the players that they're not forced to go in a certain order. It's just for organizational purposes. That is to say that if I'm playing at the table with a new group, I'm going to say, and let's say that player 1, 3, and 5 are doing melee. I will turn to player 1 first and say, roll your attack against the orc. Then player 3, roll your attack against the orc. They're all happening at once, and you need to make sure that's clear so they understand that in the long run, you want them all to roll at once. Now, again, this could create a weird situation if something dies before somebody gets to it. I'll talk about that in a minute. So first, I want to talk about some problems I had when I first switched to this type of initiative and this type of kind of scheme of play for 5th edition. So first of all, I just want to say, in some ways, it worked better in 5th edition than it even does in BX. And the reason why is because in that game, I didn't break it up into movement, missile, whatever. I just let people go, right, and do the thing they were doing, which in a lot of ways was very empowering for the players. When it was their side's turn to go, they just did their actions in whatever order they wanted to do them. However, initiative was a problem because some players are dex-based, let's say, we'll call it that, right? You're a rogue, I think maybe a ranger, I'm not sure. But anyways, and you have dex as your prime score, so you've got a high dexterity, which modifies your initiative. Then you might take the go first in initiative feat. I can't remember what it's called, but there's one where you get a bonus to your initiative. So you've got this massive initiative bonus. So you built this character, so they're always going to go first in initiative. So what happens when you just remove that and it's just a random D6 roll? That doesn't seem fair, right? So when I first switched there, I kind of felt a little bad. I was like, wow, some characters, they took a feat for this and they're really not getting anything from it. And I tried a few different things. I thought maybe that side should get advantage on initiative, stuff like that. But in the end, what I decided to do was I just rotated around who rolled the initiative. I went around the table in order, and first one person rolled and they might have a -3, right? Terrible initiative. The next person might have a +9, and it kind of balanced itself out. I think this works really well. It gives everybody a chance to roll initiative. And generally speaking, what I would do, if they didn't have a preference of order they were going to go in, I would also kind of use that as the order I would just refer to them. So I'd say, so you rolled initiative. So what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And again, you do the same thing. You don't have to adjudicate the actions in that order. And in fact, you shouldn't. You should adjudicate them in the order the players want to. Your players will be very clever and they will place certain things in certain areas. And then you don't have to worry about things like holding actions and stuff like that. But again, we'll talk about that in a second. What's nice here is that we really set up a situation where, because I'm not breaking it down and saying missile fire has to go before magic, we can basically say you're going to cast your spell before they shoot their missile in 5e. And I thought that worked really well. So the part of the procedural combat that worked for me there was the side initiative and the allowing the players to have a moment to work together as a team. This created some really, really fun moments in combat. Okay, let me talk about all these little things I said I was going to talk about. The classic example that I hear is the orc that you wanted to attack is killed. So what do? You say, I'm going to run to attack that orc, and the next player says, I'm going to shoot my bow. They shoot their bow and they kill the orc before you get there. Now you're standing there with your sword and you're just like, I didn't get to do anything. Well, some people are fine with that. I'm not, to be honest. I don't generally hold people 100% strictly to their action that they say up front. I allow some leeway because, again, combat's fast and furious. You might make a choice. But if you ran this way 30 feet and that orc dies and the other orc is way over here 30 feet, yeah, I'm not going to let you run over there and kill that orc. But in theory, if there's another orc relatively close by, you can just attack them. It's really not a big deal. You really want to make things fun. You don't need to hold people to such strict things. And of course, you can always just tell the players, which orc are you shooting with the bow? You know that the barbarian's attacking this orc. Is that the one you want to shoot with the bow? I mean, maybe they'll do it. It really depends, right? And ideally, they won't steal that kill, if you will. But it doesn't happen as often as you'd think. It's one of those like cases that people will bring up. Well, I wasted my turn. But remember that in this type of combat, because things are kind of moving along quickly, you're not waiting that long for your next turn. So rolling back to procedural combat in BX, one of the most powerful things about That system and the phases is spell interruptions. If you are hit and take damage before your spell goes off, you lose it. This creates some really great strategies. Some things that I allow, which aren't necessarily in the rules, is, for instance, if a magic user says, I'm going to cast a spell, I allow the fighter to say, I'm going to stand in front of them with my shield, and if any arrows come this way, I want to try to basically be a human shield. I allow that kind of stuff because I think that fits the fiction. So be open to things like that. When your magic user says, I'm going to cast sleep at the goblins who all have a bunch of bows pointed at you, and the fighter goes, I want to run in front and guard the magic user, let them do it. Finally, let's talk about holding actions. So again, you don't really need to hold actions here because you can just go in whatever order you want. This is one of the beauties of this. You can say, hey, I'm going to run in front of the magic user, and then the magic user is going to cast a spell, right? It's as simple as that. But what if you're using phases and things have to happen in a certain order? This would be that time, right? You might say, well, I want to shoot my bow, but I want to wait until the enemy moves closer to me. So I actually want to go after. Maybe you want to do that because you want them in a shorter range. So let's say, for instance, we've got orcs that are like 100 feet away. I don't really know the range of a short bow, but let's say that puts it in long range for your short bow. And the orcs are going to run forward this round, and you know that. You could say, even though you want initiative, I would allow somebody to say, I'm going to wait till the orcs run forward, and then I'm going to shoot them. I think that's totally all right, and it's important to be flexible with these systems. I think they were designed to be flexible, and one of the things that is a barrier for some people is they follow some of these rules too strictly. Use the phases as a means to keep your combat organized. Use it as a way for the combat to be fast and furious, but don't use it as shackles for the player or for the enemies. Make exceptions when it makes sense. Just make sure that it makes sense. All right, I hope that was helpful. Let me know below if you use procedural combat. Do you play things like OSE or BX or Original Dungeons & Dragons, First Edition Dungeons & Dragons? I think Second might also have that. I'm not sure when they switched over to individual initiative. I'm pretty sure Third Edition definitely did. So let me know in the comments below. There's lots of games that have individual initiative that I think work well, but overall, I like a side initiative. I like a procedural combat. It works for me. Let me know what works for you. Check the description below. You're going to find a link to my Discord server. Lots of great people over there discussing game design and running games. So this kind of conversation comes up quite a bit. Also down there, you're going to find a link to my t-shirts. If you'd like a Band to Keep t-shirt, check it out. I'll talk to you soon.